I always like to bring in guests. I talked about his article earlier this week, and I felt like, it would be good to follow up. So the man who's hearing the word on the street, Jared Mueller, he works with Dogs by Nature. He's been doing this for a while, has his ear to the ground. He hears some things, and he's telling us, the rumblings are out there. Jared, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm good. I'm slowly recovering from the combine. It's a mad dash from like 7:30 in the morning till 3 in the morning. Like it is just a go for 6 days. So I'm slowly recovering.
It's funny. Like I've had some friends who got credentialed for like the Senior Bowl this year, and they had like the same experience where it's like, oh yeah, it's like all kind of crazy. It's kind of like the Senior Bowl is like the training to get to the combine. Like you do good for a couple Senior Bowls, then you get ready for the combine, and it's kind of the same thing where it's like you're just running around trying to make connections with people, trying to hear things from different coaches and here and there. So it's just funny how even there in the world of sports talk, the microcosm gets created that there's even a combine for the combine.
For the combine, yeah.
For the people who ain't running in the combine, who are covering the running in the combine.
Hey, last week I walked 45 miles.
Whew.
I'm like, it ain't me. Like, I'm glad I got some good shoes. 45 miles ain't no joke.
Mm-hmm. You gotta get some good shoes, gotta get some treadmill steps in. Really like underrated calf stretches and exercises. Probably really deep there because you walk a lot, you get older, your knees ain't as great. That's the calves take a lot of that energy. You know what I mean?
Them young cats were calling me dad most of the week, and I was about to fight somebody.
It is an awkward age gap too when you're doing sports coverage because it's like it's not that old to be like 45 or 50 in sports coverage because like a lot of dudes do this like they're 80 or 70. But if you walk around and you're like 25 or something like that, you're like, oh wow, look at the 16-year-old out here covering sports.
I can get into the bar this year, Jared. Go someplace. Walk in traffic, brother.
Part of the reason I try not to argue with people on Twitter anymore is I've realized that these kids are like probably 13 that I'm arguing with. And why am I arguing with anybody born in 2010 or after? Like, I'm just not doing that. I'm not having an argument with anybody who was born after 2010. Like, come on, man. Derek Anderson had his best year of his career, and then you were born 3 years after. That's my cutoff point. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
you were born at 2010. I don't got much to. I'm not arguing with you. You know what I mean? Like, what's there to argue with? 2010? I remember 2010. Like,
hey, if you don't remember AIM, I'm out. Like, you got to at least remember a little bit of instant messenger, away messages, some of that stuff, or I'm pretty sure we ain't living in the same world.
Let me tell you something. I'm not arguing with somebody on my Twitter account when my Twitter account is older than that person. Like I got Twitter like '09. Like nah, like I'm not about to have these arguments with you. Like this is a ridiculous thing for me to engage in at this point.
Yes, sir.
But speaking of trying to get engaged in most of what you're doing, in your article, which has been kind of aggregated a lot this past week, you heard about Andrew Berry, and people are saying that he's looking to be aggressive. Is there anything else you can add to that on some of the aggression that you're hearing from?
Yeah, literally every agent and every team is like, he's got 2 or 3 moves he's trying to figure out with me. Like, he's asked about this. What about this? Could we do this? What do you think about this player? Where does this go? That he's really in that build mindset. Like, he's trying to make things happen. And so, we off air, we talked a little bit about Nick Chubb. Like, the idea of him tearing down doesn't make sense. Now, he's had teams go, well, what would that look like? He's like, a lot. And they're like, all right, we got you. It ain't happening. But he's literally trying to figure every nook and cranny out. And if it seems silly, he's still going to ask about it. And so teams know that they can get really creative with Andrew. For example, I'm going to use DeForest Buckner because he's the one that comes to mind. I don't think that's a guy they're going to get. But for DeForest Buckner, Andrew has probably had the conversation. I'll give you a 3 and a 5 for Buckner and a next year 4 or next year 5. Like, he's not just kind of giving you that real simple base kind of trade concept. He's looking to make everything work. Even in some of his trade up, trade downs, he's almost never gotten rid of a pick. He's just moved other picks down, right? Like, so it's just a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's been really, you're right. When it comes to aggregation's been fun. It's also been fun to watch, Mary Kay talk about Jesse Bates wants to play with Deshaun Watson. Players want to go there. The Eagles stuff has been reported by other people after I reported it. The fact that this draft is pretty much the same from pick 10, 12 to pick like 75. Like some people are starting to push that kind of narrative. It's been fun to be like, all right, in Indy, I got sources. And once I leave Indy, I don't really like talking on the phone and I don't like texting. So once I leave Indy, if I'm not there in person with you, I may not have sources, but I got sources in Indy.
It's also interesting because I think one of the bigger gaps in perception is how people view the brand of the Cleveland Browns versus the people who are actually in the Browns right now. Because it's like, if you talk about Andrew Berry, people go out their way to like gush about Andrew Berry in a way that's not normal for most people to do about their peers. Like I remember I was watching Tony Khan in an interview for Dan Le Batard, and he mentioned, oh yeah, the Browns got Andrew Berry. Oh, he's going to be like good. Like people go out their way to compliment him, and like anybody who's worked with them, they always kind of say similar stuff about him. And I'm like, oh, he has a lot of like respect around the league, and he's probably one of those people who's like, hey, let me call Andrew on this and see if he's willing to get creative on this. You know what I mean? Because what we don't think about, we think about trades as if Andrew's just going to come up with this idea and slap it on the table of the Detroit Lions GM, where a lot of this is just, we're on a call and we have a goal. I want, like, let's keep using DeForest Buckner. I want DeForest Buckner. You want my second round pick. Let's see what we can do to make you feel good about this. So I can get this player and that. And then that's where you can have the conversation and the negotiation of like, hey, well, what if we get a little creative here? Would this player excite you? And then you try to you grasp what they would be interested in from their interest on that player. And it's a work together kind of thing. Like trades are a collaborative effort more than they are a combative thing, right? Because I think we look at trades like, oh, you're going to counter with this offer and that. It's like, no, this is a collaboration at the point to make both teams better.
And I think, yeah, like they trust Andrew. Like Andrew is going to be real with them. He's not trying to manipulate. No one believes Andrew uses this offer against this player. Like everyone trusts Andrew Berry, and trust is a huge thing in the NFL. And really it's in any job, right? And then you add to it like Kevin Stefanski, Jim Schwartz, Bubba Ventrone, like that group. Like I know Browns fans don't like Kevin, whatever. I get it. There's reasons for that, but man, there's a lot of respect around the league. Like if that guy gets fired, I'd be okay with him being my head coach, OC. I don't really care. Like there's a lot of respect because he's just true to himself. They know what they're getting. There's no game playing, right? Like we want to be treated like adults. And so you treat them like an adult and you know what you're talking about. People are good.
And most good trades come from places where you have great relationships with, right? Like this is universal for all sports. The reason the Cavs were able to get Donovan Mitchell versus the Knicks was because Kobe Altman had a great relationship with with Utah's general manager, or president of basketball ops there, right? Like there was an understanding of we're trying to make each other better. We're willing to talk this out and think this out. And it wasn't a competitive thing where the Utah felt like the Knicks were being competitive with what they were doing with RJ Barrett's contract and these moves that just didn't feel like a collaboration. It's a collaboration, right? Like these things work. You see the good trades happen where you're like, how did this guy get him? Well, he called him because Dale's the guy he calls. You know what I mean? Like, whenever that happens in the NFL, you're like, why didn't they shop around this guy for the best deals? Because they're trying to collaborate with people that they trust, right? Like, I'm not going to just bring people on the show to collaborate with me that I feel like are going to try and make me look bad. Like, that's not the goal. I bring people on. I'm like, okay, we can work together to make an entertaining product or to make something and go better here. And that's what that is. And I think the way we view it as fans is a little bit different than what it is. And that respect is massive there. And you look at Andrew Berry in his trade history, he's been aggressive, right? And bringing in Amari Cooper for a 5th round pick. Obviously, Deshaun Watson is the most aggressive move you could probably make as a general manager. And it's just interesting to hear how different the perception is on what gets a trade done from the outside looking in versus the reality of it, which is, I want to trade with people I like. You know what I mean? Like I want to collaborate with people that I trust. And that's one of the most important things. You talked about Kevin being really respected there. That seems to ring out to around the league. What do you make of the reported, like, the change? I think a lot of people are just assuming that these changes are going to happen with the offense with Deshaun Watson. Now, obviously, it makes sense. You pay that much money for a quarterback, you're going to play to his strengths. Do you think that our expectations have gotten so high that this is going to change so dramatically that if it even resembles Kevin's offense, we're going to be up in arms about it on Twitter and like we complain like, oh, we didn't change anything. We still do play action. We still, dump out here.
I think the reality is one of the things I sometimes forget is that the whole wide zone scheme and the Gary Kubiak stuff literally was 1 year in Minnesota. Before that, the first 15 years, he was under different coordinators. And it really wasn't that wasn't his bread and butter. And so he brought in Bill Musgrave. Musgrave's offense in Cal was great running out of the shotgun. So I think you're going to see a real meld of, and this is going to sound so arrogant, but a real meld of the Eagles and Chiefs offenses. Like you're going to see the Chiefs run a lot of inside zone. And then some of the creativity with getting the ball out quickly and RPOs and some of the stuff you see out of Andy Reid and screen game and all that. Like, I think you're going to see a real meld of that. I don't think you're going to see as much running, obviously, out of Watson as you see out of Jalen Hurts. But everything I hear is all that Kevin cares about is there some balance? Can you run the ball? And can you make runs and pass look similar? Well, wide zone does a lot of that, but so does RPO. It's literally both at the same time. So it kind of achieves the same goal that Kevin has. So I think we're still going to see some of it, but I think what you might see is almost like a fourth quarter offense. Like, we're winning. Let's just line up and let's run some wide zone. Let's get some creases. Let's whatever. But yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of shotgun, and I think it's really going to piss off Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr., who wanted to be trusted in that kind of system, but didn't have Kevin Stefanski's or teammates' trust to run that kind of system. So it's going to piss those two boys off. But besides that, I think it's going to look significantly different most of the time.
Well, both of them, I don't think they are officially on the team as of right now. That's a couple of days from now. So, unfortunate for them.
About to get to team 4 in 365 days.
So, it's going to be interesting to see what his career turns into. But, I was wondering that with Deshaun, one of the things that I saw during the last part of the season was Deshaun is not somebody who's been asked to be on time when it comes to throwing the ball. Like, he's been asked to be Deshaun. And what Deshaun is a very, very, like, for those of us who don't remember watching Deshaun at his peak, it's kind of like when you watch Bryce Young and you're like, oh, he never loses track of anything, right? Like, he's not making the quick read, the quick throw. He's not pre-snap. Well, he's pretty good at pre-snap, but he's not pre-snap. I'm going to rely on that, and I'm going to throw real quick. I want to see what they're doing post-snap, and then I think I could squeeze them and get extra yards out of them once I can manipulate them post-snap. And that was kind of what I saw the friction was between the performance and the play style was Deshaun still trying to do the post-snap stuff that he's really good at, but he's in an offense that when you have somebody like Jacoby Brissett, you're going to want it to rely more on pre-snap because it's a lot easier to find guys who could pre-snap process in the NFL versus post-snap process because it's happening like that, right? Like, very few guys can actually like set back there and go, okay, and figure things out and not move super fast to them, right? Like, you don't want to put Jacoby in that situation. So, but they had to put an offense together for 11 weeks with that in mind. And I think once Deshaun got in there, it was like, well, we can't just change the structure of how these reads go down. I think it's just going to have to be, he's going to have to run this, get used to this, and then we'll build around what he's like there. So I think a lot of like timing stuff that we saw last year, that stuff like the quick slants and all that, I think he's probably not going to do that as much. And he's probably going to do more plays where he's going to be holding on to the ball more. He's going to get sacked. Deshaun Watson gets sacked everywhere he goes. But what do you think as far as like free agent acquisitions? Do you think that there are specific position groups that they're trying to hit very heavy here? Or is it like safety, or are they just trying to get marquee guys at a certain level onto the team?
I mean, they know the problems. Like, we all see the problem. They know the problem. I think for them, it's really I think the hardest thing is normally the combine ends and then today they're signing. Mm-hmm. The gap of a week really made it harder because there's a lot more shopping going on. And so in the past, I mean, Andrew Berry has signed somebody at the top of the market every year so far, right? And they haven't all worked out, but he has signed somebody at the top of the market. Conklin and JJ3 and whatever. And so defensive tackle is it. Like you're going to hear all of the Eagles players on the defensive line: Jason Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham. They're not so sure about linebacker. They know they need to take care of that, but will Anthony Walker be healthy enough? Is he the right fit that they want to do there? Safety is going to be important, and then slot corner. So interestingly, they do see a need there, but whether they're able to find that in free agency, whether they see that as their safety guy. What I was told in Indy is no one really understands how they're going to spend on receiver, right? Whether it's a high draft pick or in free agency, because it just doesn't. How do you spend more resources there, especially if you extend Donovan Peoples-Jones? So I don't think he's marquee shopping per se. I think he just wants good players, and so if he gets Jason Hargrave and Jesse Bates, great. But if he doesn't, he's going to get Jesse Bates and 2 defensive linemen. But it is a lot about the defense. Now, if DeAndre Hopkins really does want to rework his deal and they can get him for next year's 4th round pick or whatever, yeah, he might make that deal. But it doesn't make sense from an asset allocation. They've already got their top 4 weapons with Cooper, DPJ, and Njoku and Chubb. So you're really talking about getting that 5th weapon. Well, you're going to spend a lot of assets on that. It just doesn't make sense. It might make sense at 42 or in a trade down. But yeah, it's a lot about defense. Tight end, there's a few guys that might kind of slip through the cracks. That's really kind of where they're looking.
Yeah, and one of the things I read in your article I thought was one of the things that kind of slid under the radar, but I thought was interesting was something in there where it said they kind of believe in Jim Schwartz's ability to work with what's there more so than feel the urgency to go and like get a giant name there. So does that mean, in from your interpretation of it, do you think that they're more likely to lean on his development skills there, or do you think it's like maybe we still add a veteran here or there, but if you're looking for Daron Payne or us to panic and get somebody like that to fix the group, they feel like Jim Schwartz was the move to fix the group?
I think really the word you use there is right. They're not going to panic because they have Jim Schwartz, right? So they are going to believe that, listen, if they can get one of those top guys, cool, because Jim Schwartz will just make them better, but they're not going to panic. They're not going to go outside of their realm because they have Jim Schwartz. If it doesn't work out, they believe they can build a really good defensive line with some guys, right? And they think some guys are going to want to come to play with him. But listen, if they can get Hargrave, they're going to be happy to get Hargrave, right? They'll take that move. They're just not going to panic. They're not going to overpay because the defensive line was so terrible the last couple of years.
I say this, and I've said this all offseason. This is one of the more interesting off seasons in Browns history because it's the first time we've ever worked around a quarterback contract. Like, we've never had to do that, right? And it's kind of a weird situation where he kind of earned a contract on a different team. So like
a few years ago,
yeah. So we're just like, oh well, he should, right? It makes sense. He should be good, and he probably will be good. But it's also this kind of anxiety because we haven't seen it in this uniform yet, right? And I think until we see it in this uniform, we're going to continue to be anxious about it. But we got to operate as if we've seen it, right? Because other than that, the contract doesn't make any sense if you're not going to operate like that. Do you see, and I guess this is the last question out here, I think that these next 2 years are the window where they're like, hey, the first window in this Deshaun era, we got to go after it here. We got Nick Chubb, 27 to 30. He's going to be turning 30 after the next 3 years. Same thing with Myles Garrett. Same thing with a lot of the premier players on this defense. I think even Denzel Ward's getting up to that age. And you want to win in that first window because, hey, maybe Myles ages and he's there with the second window. And I think that's a possibility when you look at like the kind of freak he is physically. And maybe even Nick Chubb, because like the wear and tear on him is not that bad. He doesn't have serious injuries. So maybe he ages well, right? But there are going to be players where it's like, hey, the first run with Aaron Rodgers ain't going to be the same as the second run. Like Big Ben is a good example of this. He went to the Super Bowl in like 2004. I think his like second year in the NFL. And that was a completely different core that he went with in 2010, right? You have these pockets of windows. Tom Brady is another example where he had that first window where he was winning a lot of Super Bowls, didn't go after for a while, and then that second extended window since he's Tom Brady, right, where he was going there. And it changed. Like a lot of pieces around him changed. It was just Tom Brady that was there and Bill Belichick. And then obviously 2020, he switches teams. So you have these pockets of windows where you're like, okay, this is going to be 3 years we're going to attack. And then I think they're thinking, hey, this is the young window we're going to attack with the young Deshaun. And then maybe if he ages gracefully and we're getting to a point to where he's like 32 and he's looking like he's about to have that like prime body meets mind MVP level play. All right, we're going to go all in on that window once we can clear some of these contracts and build young again. I think this is that first window. Am I tripping when I think that?
No, you're exactly right. Like the real question isn't, so the first window is this 2 to 3 year period. The real question with Andrew Berry, and I'm just going to assume Andrew Berry's here, right? That's what it is, right? Is how long does he plateau, right? So how long does he keep the guys he's keeping? Does he not want to plateau? Does he not want to stay the same? So 2 to 3 window, and then does he sell it off, rebuild quicker? That's really going to be the biggest question, is how long does he keep the window open? Or does that aggressive nature become aggressively like, all right, we're going to get young real quick. We're going to have 2 years of young, and then we're back a little quicker? Or does he kind of keep the window, even if they're on the back end of it, keep the window open? But you're exactly right. There's that 2 to 3 year window. And then I think the real question is, how long is the plateau, tear down, rebuild? How long does that process take? And what are they doing in the middle of all that? And that's where they get those picks back, right? They start, or not get the picks back, but can actually have first round picks and actually do some of that is in a couple of years. So no, I think you're right on with kind of where Andrew is and what they're thinking. They're also thinking the salary cap's going up $15 to $20 million every year, and he's just planning like it's going to happen. They'd be really screwed if something happened and all of a sudden that didn't, because that is really what they're planning on. That cap just keep going up, 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 and up, and we'll figure it out from here.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to have you on, Jared. Thank you for coming on. Make sure you check out his stuff. Links will be in the description down below. Jared, thank you for coming on. Viewers at home, I want to appreciate you coming in for today. Everybody have a great day. Have a good night.